You can be sitting at a dinner table with the people who raised you, surrounded by familiar voices and familiar food, and still feel completely alone. Not lonely in the way you feel when no one texts you back. Alone in a deeper, quieter way, like watching your own life through a window you can't open. You smile at the right moments, you answer the questions, and somewhere underneath all of it, a voice keeps asking, "Why don't I feel like I belong here?" And by the end of this, you'll understand why that feeling isn't a sign that something is broken in you, but rather a signal pointing towards something you haven't yet been allowed to become. Let's sit with that for a second. Because most of us, when we feel that distance from family, do one of two things. We either blame ourselves, deciding we're too sensitive, too different, too much, or we blame them, building a quiet case against the people we love, cataloging every dismissal and every misunderstanding like evidence in a trial that never reaches a verdict. Neither of these approaches helps. Both of them keep you stuck inside the same painful loop. And what I want to do today is offer you a way out of that loop, not by fixing your family and not by fixing yourself, but by understanding what's actually happening beneath the surface. The psychoanalyst Carl Jung once wrote that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. I've sat with that line for a long time, because I think what makes family so complicated is that family is often the first place where we learn that complete self-acceptance is not safe. Before we had language for it, before we could articulate who we were, the people around us were already shaping us, rewarding certain versions of ourselves and quietly discouraging others. And so the self you became was, in part, a negotiation, a compromise between who you actually are and who your environment needed you to be. The conventional wisdom says that if you feel like an outsider in your family, you should either work harder to connect, communicate more openly, or accept the differences and move on. Therapists call it setting expectations or building bridges. And while none of that is wrong, exactly, it misses something fundamental. It treats the symptom without asking why the wound exists in the first place. And the wound, when you trace it back, is almost never about the specific arguments or the specific disappointments. It's about something older and more structural than that. It's about identity. It's about who you were allowed to be and who you were not. So let's go deeper, because understanding this at an intellectual level is one thing. Feeling it in your body and your history is something else entirely. Psychologists who study family systems, a field pioneered by researchers like Murray Bowen and later expanded by theorists like Virginia Satir, have found something consistent and quietly devastating. Families don't just raise individuals, they maintain systems. And systems, by their very nature, resist change. Every family has an unspoken set of rules about who each person is supposed to be. One sibling is the responsible one, another is the funny one. One child carries the family's anxiety, another gets to be free. These rules aren't assigned consciously. Nobody sits down and says, "You will be the scapegoat." But they emerge and they harden, and over time they become load-bearing walls in the architecture of the family's identity. Here's what makes this so disorienting. When you grow, when you change, when you start to develop a sense of self that doesn't fit neatly into the role you were assigned, the system pushes back. Not necessarily with cruelty, sometimes with silence. Sometimes with a subtle shift in the room's energy when you say something that doesn't match who they've decided you are. Researchers call this family homeostasis, TE, which is just a clinical way of saying that families unconsciously fight to stay the same. And if you're the one changing, you will often feel the friction of that fight, even when nobody is openly fighting. A study published in the Journal of Family Psychology found that individuals who underwent significant personal development in adulthood through therapy, education, travel, or major life transitions consistently reported increased feelings of alienation from their families of origin. Not because they loved their families less, but because they had changed in ways the family system hadn't accounted for. The researchers described it as a kind of relational lag, an asen, where the person has moved forward, but the relationship is still operating on old code. Think of it like software. Imagine your family installed a version of you early on, a kind of emotional and behavioral program that matched what the household needed. And for years, that version ran without conflict. But then, somewhere along the way, you started updating. You had experiences, you developed new values, you asked questions the old version of you never would have asked, and now you're running on updated software, but everyone around you is still interacting with the old program. They're confused when you respond differently. You're exhausted from being treated like a version of yourself that no longer exists. And here's where it gets really uncomfortable. Part of you, a deeply conditioned part, still wants to run the old program. Because the old program was approved. The old program was loved. There's a concept in developmental psychology called individuation, first articulated in depth by Carl Jung, and it refers to the lifelong process of becoming who you actually are, as distinct from who you were shaped to be. Jung believed that most people never fully individuate, not because they lack the capacity, but because the social cost is too high. Your family, your community, your culture, they all have a stake in you staying predictable. And there is a real grief in discovering that the people who love you most might also be the ones most invested in you not changing. That grief doesn't get talked about enough. We talk about family estrangement in extremes. Either someone has cut off a toxic parent, which we frame as brave, or they're complaining about minor dysfunction, which we dismiss as self-indulgent. But there's a huge middle space that most people live in. A space where you love your family and also feel unseen by them. Where the holidays are still happening and the birthdays are still celebrated and there is genuine warmth in the room, and yet you carry this low hum of loneliness that you can never quite explain to anyone who hasn't felt it. The psychologist Abraham Maslow, best known for his hierarchy of needs, did less well-known work in the 1960s on what he called the Jonah complex. He named it after the biblical prophet Jonah, who, you'll remember, ran from his calling. Maslow argued that people fear their own greatness almost as much as they fear failure. And in a family context, this fear of becoming fully yourself can be reinforced by the subtle message that standing out too much, growing too far, becoming someone unfamiliar is a form of abandonment. Like your growth is a betrayal of where you came from. I've been there too. I know what it's like to sit across from someone you love and realize that the person they're talking to doesn't fully exist anymore. They're speaking to a memory of you, and you don't know whether to correct them or just play along. Because playing along is easier, and correcting them costs something neither of you has budgeted for that afternoon. So what do we do with all of this? Here is where I want to introduce a reframe, and it comes, perhaps unexpectedly, from existentialist philosophy. The philosopher Martin Heidegger wrote about what he called thrownness. The German word is Geworfenheit. It's one of those words that's almost better in German because it sounds exactly like what it means, to be thrown. Heidegger's idea is that we are each born into a situation we did not choose. A family, a culture, a historical moment, a body. These are the conditions of our existence, and none of us consented to them. We were simply thrown into them. And the question of how to live, Heidegger argued, is really the question of what you do with the situation into which you were thrown. This isn't fatalism. It's actually the opposite. Because once you accept that your starting conditions were arbitrary, not chosen, not deserved, not a reflection of your worth, you become free to relate to them differently. Your family is not a verdict on who you are. They are the river you were born in, and a river shapes you without question. The current, the temperature, the particular way the water moves through you, all of that leaves a mark. But you are not the river. You are the person who learned to swim in it. And learning to swim in one river doesn't mean you can never exist in any other water. Erich Fromm, the social psychologist and philosopher who wrote Escape from Freedom, argued that one of the deepest human conflicts is the tension between our need for belonging and our need for individuation. We need to be part of something, a family, a community, a tradition. That need is real and legitimate, and we also need to be ourselves, fully and without apology. These two needs are not always compatible, and when they clash, the pain we feel isn't weakness or ingratitude. It's the structural tension of being a human being who was born into a world made by other human beings. What Fromm noticed, and what I think is deeply important, is that many people resolve this tension by choosing belonging at the expense of selfhood. They shrink, they perform, they become very good at being whoever the room needs them to be. And for a while, this works. There's no conflict. There's even a kind of comfort in it. But over time, the self that was suppressed doesn't disappear. It shows up as anxiety, as numbness, as a vague dissatisfaction you can't locate. It shows up as the feeling of being a stranger at your own table. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, would add another layer here. Frankl argued that the primary human drive isn't pleasure or power, as Freud and Adler respectively suggested, but meaning. And one of the cruelest forms of suffering is to find yourself unable to be authentic in the relationships that are supposed to be most intimate. Because it makes those relationships feel meaningless, even when they are technically functioning, even when everyone is technically fine. And here's the reframe I want you to hold on to. Feeling like an outsider in your family doesn't mean you are an outsider. It means you have developed a self. It means the process of individuation is working. And the discomfort you feel, that strange loneliness in familiar rooms, is not a sign of failure. It's the feeling of becoming. It's what growth feels like from the inside when the people around you haven't grown in the same direction. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus, who was born into slavery and became one of the ancient world's most profound thinkers, made a distinction that I find endlessly useful. He separated the things that are up to us from the things that are not up to us. Your family, their perceptions of you, their capacity or willingness to meet you where you are now, these are not up to you. What is up to you is how you interpret your own experience, what meaning you assign to it, and who you choose to become in response to it. This doesn't mean detachment. This doesn't mean you stop caring about your family or stop trying to connect. It means you stop making their recognition of you the condition for your own self-recognition. It means you stop waiting for them to give you permission to be who you already are. So now let's talk about what this actually looks like in the real, imperfect, uncomfortable texture of daily life. Because I know it's one thing to hear a philosophy idea and think, yes, that resonates. It's another to sit across from your mother at Thanksgiving and not dissolve into the old patterns. The first question I'd invite you to sit with is this: which version of yourself shows up around your family? Not which version should show up, not which version you wish could show up, but which version actually appears when you walk through that door. Do you get quieter? Do you get louder in a performative way? Do you revert to old habits, old opinions, old ways of speaking that you've otherwise moved away from? Just notice, without judgment. Because that noticing is data. It tells you something about where the system is still pulling you and where you still have some of your own freedom left to reclaim. The second thing I'd invite you to do, and this is harder, is to practice what the therapist and author Harriet Lerner calls staying in the room without losing yourself. Lerner's work on family systems and emotional triangles, especially in her book, The Dance of Anger, explores how we can remain genuinely present in difficult family dynamics without either withdrawing into silence or erupting into the old conflicts. Staying in the room means you don't run from the discomfort. Losing yourself means you don't dissolve into it either. It's a narrow path, and the only way to walk it is to know who you are before you walk through the door. which means doing the work of self-definition outside the family context, so that you're not relying on the family to tell you who you are every time you see them. The third invitation is this: grieve what was not given. I mean that seriously. One of the most under-acknowledged sources of pain in family dynamics is unmourned loss. Not the loss of a person, but the loss of a relationship that never quite existed in the form you needed it to. The parent who was physically present, but emotionally unavailable. The sibling bond that never developed. The version of yourself that never got to be celebrated. These are real losses. And our culture is very bad at letting people grieve relational losses that don't involve death. But you cannot move forward cleanly while you're still waiting for something to be given to you that may never come. Grieving, it means acknowledging it. It means saying, that thing I needed, I didn't get it, and that mattered, and I'm allowed to feel the weight of that without needing to blame anyone for it. This is where psychology and philosophy converge in a way I find genuinely beautiful. Because both disciplines, at their deepest level, are asking the same question. Given the conditions you were born into, given the wounds and the gifts, and the specific river you were thrown into, what does it mean to live well? What does it mean to be free? Not in the sense of being unconstrained, but in the sense of responding to your life rather than just reacting to it. The psychologist and philosopher William James, who is sometimes called the father of American psychology, wrote that the greatest revolution of our generation is the discovery that human beings, by changing the inner attitudes of their minds, can change the outer aspects of their lives. That's not toxic positivity. James isn't saying you can think your way out of real pain. He's saying that the meaning you make of your experience is the most powerful tool you have. And you, not your family, are the author of that meaning. Here is what I want to leave you with. You did not choose the family you were born into. You did not choose the roles that were assigned to you, the needs that shaped you, the silences that formed you. But you are here now, reading and thinking, and asking questions that the assigned version of you might never have asked. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, everything. Rainer Maria Rilke, the poet, wrote in his Letters to a Young Poet, something that I return to again and again. He wrote, "I would like to beg you, dear friend, as well as I can, to have patience with everything unresolved in your heart, and to try to love the questions themselves as if they were locked rooms or books written in a very foreign language. Don't search for the answers, which could not be given to you now, because you would not be able to live them. And the point is, to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps then, someday far in the future, you will gradually, without even noticing it, live your way into the answer." That is what I think this feeling is, at its core. Not a problem to be solved, not a wound to be healed on a timeline, but a question you are living your way through. And the fact that you're asking it at all, the fact that you feel the friction between who you are and who you were shaped to be, means you're already further along than you know. If this is the kind of conversation you want more of, subscribing means you won't miss the next one. We don't do quick takes here. We try to go somewhere real. And I'll leave you with one question to sit with, not to answer right now, but to carry. When was the last time you showed up, in your family, as fully yourself, and what did it cost you? That answer will tell you more than any video can.